Dear learners, today we will start the second part of My Experiments with Truth by our father of nation, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi. When we come back to the details, Gandhi by this time won not just the respect but also the love of Indian community in South Africa. As he explains in his own terms, my work would be mainly to make you all work. And how could I charge you for that, Africa? His unusually stringent and holistic approach towards authority, law and morals, his keen interest in matters well outside his brief, such as racial discrimination, religious division and sanitation, and his enthusiasm for petitioning and pamphleteering, organizing meeting and traveling has made him many friends and admirers. It is, as Gandhi himself writes, not a real autobiography, but a Spartan, goal-directed one, closely focused only on those incidents and encounters in his life which bear upon the practice of truth. It reflects its author's impatience with inessentials and his constant search for first principles. It is rich in lessons and maxims, in speculations about root causes and deep connections, and in an infectious moral restlessness and urgency. Well read about how a lascivious Gandhi becomes a brahmachari, following the truth and experimenting with it and discovering the power of the mind. Following the tenets such as Satya, Dharma and humanity, Gandhi takes on a slow-moving, self-reflective journey. Also, he speaks of movements of civil disobedience, non-cooperation, Jallianwala Bagh massacre and various landmarks of Indian freedom struggle, yet the main subject remains Gandhi's resilience, persistence within to transform himself to serve others better till his death. Students, now we will look into the aspect of the making of the Mahatma, as how Gandhi was made the Mahatma of the nation. A number of changes in Gandhi's personal life soon impacted his growing celebrity status. The first was his achievement of brahmacharya, or voluntary abstention from sexual relations. He seems to have regarded it as a part of his quest for selflessness and restraint in all aspects of life. His fame as the politician saint of South Africa and the founder of Satyagraha had spread throughout India, and now cheering crowds cried Mahatma Ji, Ji being a suffix connoting affection. Wherever he appeared, people addressed him as Mahatma. Mahatma meant great soul, an appellation applied to the holiest men of Hinduism, and was first conferred upon Gandhi by the great Indian poet and Nobel laureate Rabindranath Tagore in 1913. Despite his distaste for it, Mahatma was a title he would bear until his death and beyond. And while there were other Mahatmas in India of his lifetime, Gandhi is the only one remembered today. Gandhi read for the first time John Ruskin's book, Unto This Last, which maintained that the life of labor, that is, of work done with the hands rather than machines, was superior to all other ways of living. Gandhi was convinced by the argument, and he considered this new idea the final piece to his personal philosophy. He quickly applied Ruskin's belief to his personal life, abandoning Western dress and habits to this mix of traits, and added his philosophy of political protest, which soon gained a name, Satyagraha. Taken literally, it meant truth force in Sanskrit, but in practical terms, it meant a refusal to obey unjust authority. Gandhi was among the first to appear before a magistrate for his refusal to register, and he was sentenced to 2 months' imprisonment. He was asked for a heavier sentence, a characteristic act of Satyagraha, and devoted his time in jail to reading. After his release, the campaign went on. These are the traits only of a Mahatma. So, the making of the Mahatma. In the next aspect, we see India and World War I. When war was declared in August, Gandhi was in England, where he immediately began organizing a medical corps similar to the force he had led in the Boer War. But ill health soon forced his return to India, where he received a wildly enthusiastic welcome. Indian nationalism was a fast growing phenomenon, as some members of the Indian National Congress had begun to push for Swaraj or Home Rule. To this end, Gandhi established a new settlement near the town of Ahmedabad, the capital of the western province of Gujarat, near Porbandar, the place of his birth. It came to be known as the Satyagraha Ashram since then. Gandhi's public life in India commenced in February 1916, when he gave a speech at the opening of the new Hindu University in the city of Benares. His intervention in the Champaran district on behalf of impoverished indigo cultivators led to a government commission on being appointed to investigate abuses by the indigo planters. At the same time, he discovered what was to become one of his most effective weapons in later years, the fast. As the war in Europe dragged to its conclusion, that is in 1917 to 18 of that year, Gandhi began tramping about India, recruiting men for the British Army. Although his dreams of home rule had grown stronger, he was still loyal to Britain and to the ideals of the British Constitution, with which he later declared to have fallen in love. But the Indian people, having listened to him preach non-violence and resistance to unjust authority, had a difficult time accepting him in the role of a recruitment officer. How, they wondered, could the apostle of peace ask them to take up arms in defense of the Raj? By then, the subcontinent had remained loyal for the most part, and Indian troops had fought valiantly for the empire around the globe. But the seeds of the Raj's downfall were sown. Britain was drained of both manpower and will, and would never again regain the sunny optimism that had characterized its 19th century rule. The interwar years would soon bring a malaise to the empire, as a series of mediocre governments stood by impotently in the face of a hostile Germany's rise to power and the progressive loss of their own domination. Meanwhile, India was restive. The British had destroyed the world's only Muslim power, the Ottoman Empire, and the loyalty of Indians, Muslims, were questionable. And having fought a war whose supposed purpose was to protect the rights of small states and independent people from tyranny, the rhetoric of British rule in India had begun to ring hollow. As you all know, Gandhi proposed that the entire country observe a hartal when the Rowlatt Act came into force. A day of fasting, prayer and abstention from physical labor in protest against the injustice of the repressive new law was observed. Gandhi had pushed too far, too fast, and turmoil engulfed the country. As violence swept through the country, Gandhi, to the amazement of many, ordered the mobs to return to their homes and called off his campaign. If Satyagraha could not be carried out with violence, he declared, it would not be carried out at all. His appeal, however, came too late. In Amritsar, perhaps unaware of the prohibition on public meetings, or perhaps defying the British, a crowd of more than 10,000 gathered in the Jallianwala Bagh, an open space surrounded by buildings. General Dyer arrived as the head of his troops and without warning ordered his machine gunners to open fire. The official British tally for the bloody afternoon was only 379 killed and 1,137 wounded. The Amritsar Massacre had the effect of pushing moderate Indian politicians like Gandhi towards outright rebellion, and it created a climate of hostility between British and Indians. The period of non-cooperation that began in 1920 saw Gandhi moving all across India, encouraging people to give up their Western clothing and British jobs. In his wake came other volunteers who worked to turn the Congress into something it had never been before, a grassroots organization with countless local units. While Gandhi lay in bed in his ashram, the war came to an end. The subcontinent had remained loyal for the most part, and Indian troops had fought valiantly for the empire around the globe. In this atmosphere, the harried British government made a frightful mistake. They elected to follow the recommendations of the Rowlatt Committee, which advocated the retention of wartime restrictions in India, including curfews, and the suppression of free speech. During his 2-year imprisonment, Gandhi's great non-violent revolution essentially fell apart, and the struggle for Indian independence had run around on the immense, seemingly insuperable problem of disunity among Indians who had never been a nation in the Western sense and remained divided by caste, language, and most of all, religions. And Gandhi's greatest achievement throughout the 20s, 30s, and 40s was to overcome these differences to unify India by making himself the symbol of unity. In October 1924, he withdrew from political life and devoted himself to Swaraj from within, working to prepare India morally for its independence. This preparation took the form of travel throughout India, combined with speeches and articles in his magazine called Young India, advocating good hygiene, exercise, sexual self-control, and an end to child marriages, which Gandhi now considered a grave evil. The strangest and yet perhaps the most important part of his program was a devotion to his spinning wheel. His period of political passivity came to an end in 1928. The British had sent a board of inquiry called the Simon Commission to investigate social conditions in India and recommend solutions. Since the board lacked any Indian representation, it was considered a slap in the face by the nationalists. Gandhi now returned to his once abandoned plan for large-scale civil disobedience. To Gandhi's delight, no violence erupted, and on 6th of August, the government gave in. On the 2nd of March 1930, Gandhi sent his now famous letter to the Viceroy, Lord Irwin, warning him that beginning on March 11th, he and the other members of his ashram would begin breaking the salt laws. It was satyagraha on an unprecedented scale, and the Viceroy was helpless. In desperation, he ordered the Indian leaders to be arrested, beginning with Jawaharlal Nehru and ending on 5th of May with Gandhi. In January 1931, the government yielded. The prisoners were released and Gandhi met Lord Irwin, who agreed that the Indian National Congress could send a representative to the Round Table Conference to be held in London. There was no question as to who the Congress representative would be, and the obvious choice was Gandhi. After the publication of the Declaration of Independence, all India and much of Britain, they too waited anxiously to see what Gandhi would do next. By February 1930, his mind had turned to salt. Under the salt laws, the British government had a monopoly on salt, controlling both its production and distribution. On March 12th, having given the Viceroy an extra day, Gandhi and 78 others left his ashram and began to walk the 200 miles to the seacoast. There, he declared he would take a pinch of salt from the Indian Ocean, thus violating the laws of the empire, which declared that only the British could harvest salt. Practically, of course, the Salt March was a meaningless gesture, but as an act of political theatre, it had astonishing power. The attention of the world was now focused on western part of India, where the little man, accompanied by crowds from every village he passed, spent 24 days walking to the sea. He reached it on 6th of April and took salt from the ocean. Soon, all over India, the subjects of the Raj followed suit, disobeying the salt laws in massive numbers. The Congress organized the sale of illegal salt on a huge scale, and mass meetings took place in every major city. The British government cracked down, throwing people in jail, censoring the press, but all to no avail. Soon the prisoners were full to bursting with Indians, all of whom followed Gandhi's lead and made no resistance. It was satyagraha on an unprecedented scale, and the Viceroy was helpless against it. In desperation, he ordered the Indian leaders arrested, beginning with Jawaharlal Nehru and ending on 5th of May with Gandhi. But still, the demonstrations went on, lasting nearly a year, and finally, in 1931, the government yielded. The prisoners were released, and Gandhi met Lord Irwin, who agreed that the Indian National Congress could send a representative to the Round Table Conference to be held in London that fall. There was no question to who the Congress representative would be. This was the peak of Gandhi's career. Despite the groans of men like Winston Churchill, who saw in this half-naked fakir the downfall of Britain's empire, he received a friendly, even adulatory greeting from the British when he arrived for the conference that fall. Leading Englishmen from the King to George Bernard Shaw lined up for interviews, and large crowds followed him wherever he went. In a sense, it was his public relations side of the Round Table Conference that achieved the most for India, as Gandhi built considerable support for independence among the British public. The conference itself, unfortunately, was an utter disaster. No plan for independence or home rule could be agreed upon because of British concern over the treatment of minorities, especially Muslims, in a Hindu-dominated India. This difficulty was not a new one. The Muslim League, founded by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, had become a significant force in Indian politics, and its demands would make the road to independence a rocky one. Right from 1934 until the outbreak of war in 1939, as you all know, the Second World War, the duration was 1939 to 45, Gandhi left the struggle for political independence to others. He began traveling throughout the country again and again, working with women and children, helping untouchables, and promoting use of spinning wheel. He went from village to village, preaching his gospel of cleanliness, harmony, and love barefoot on the road for months at a time. Eventually, he began advocating what he called basic education. It was World War II that finally brought the itinerant saint politician back into public life. After the war broke out in 1939, the British immediately brought India into the conflict without consulting the nationalist leadership. As it was, independence came only in 1947 and the country collapsed into chaos. Gandhi was not released until May 1944, and he left the palace nursing a profound personal grief, that is, the sudden demise of his companion Kasturiba for the last 62 years, who had accompanied him and died during their confinement. We see that as the World War II wound to an end, Jinnah was pushing for an independent Muslim state, a Pakistan, an idea that Gandhi utterly unacceptable. But in March 1947, Mountbatten summoned Gandhi away from his peasant mission to meet Jinnah in Delhi, and the meeting was fruitless. Jinnah was obdurate and Gandhi was heartbroken. However, India was made independent, a fact that became official on 15th of August 1947. When we look into the real role played by Gandhi, we all have to accept that Gandhi was a great martyr. His greatest achievement lay in his legacy, for his ideals and the example he provided in living them out, inspired and continue to inspire people of all nations to take up a peaceful struggle for freedom from oppression. Thank you.